I'm not saying that every movie in the 80s sucked. I'm not saying that filmmakers sucked in the 80s. What I am saying is when you compare the 80s to the 70s or the 90s or the early 2000s, the 80s just isn't as good.
It's showtime.
This is Jesse Grant, and he's going to explain why the 80s was the worst decade for movies.
Subscribe
to Slam Brigade.
80s cinema was probably the worst decade in cinema history.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
I just don't think the 80s is very good. Now, of course, there were some gems in the 80s.
How did you guess?
The 80s just was bland. It was just boring. There weren't as many good projects per year than there were in the 70s or the 90s or the early 2000s, because what did you get? 4 or 5 good movies from the 80s?
Here's an IMDb list with 40,000 movies, and if only 5 of them are good, then you're saying that 99.987626% are ungood.
Sure thing, pal.
I'm not saying that every movie in the 80s sucked.
No, only 99.987626%.
Whereas from the 70s, you could pick 30 great films. From the 90s, you could pick 50 great films. You know, there's heaps to choose from.
Could you be any more vague?
In the 80s, there really weren't a lot of good movies. You had the Rocky franchise take a turn for the worst with Rocky 3, and when a Bond movie is called Octopussy, you know it's just not a good decade for cinema.
Octopussy is definitely a misleading title because I thought it was going to be about a woman with 8 twinkle caves, but it was taken from a novel released in 1966.
Good point.
Also, I'm not a fan of this vagueness when you make such a bold claim. You said you could name 30 great films from the 70s and 50 from the 90s, but you didn't do that. So I don't know what you think is even good.
And why it's a bad decade of movie history. For me, it's the types of characters and stories that were written.
Is it possible some of these scripts were written in the 70s but not produced until the 80s?
Could be.
Coming off the back of truthful, dark, honest, raw stories from the 70s, the 80s was almost a decade of fake naivety and of romanticizing life and giving happy endings.
Like Sophie's Choice deciding which one of her kids to abandon, and the double suicide, which we can all agree should be in a dictionary to describe barrel of laughs. And then Veronica thinks she might give birth to a maggot, and Seth turns into a fully formed flyman who she's forced to kill. And then there's Red Dawn's happy ending where only 2 people survive. And then there's the awesome aftermath of nuclear war in Threads, which again is hilarious because 17 to 38 million people died. Then there's the end of Combat Shock, where the guy kills the baby and his girlfriend and then blows his brains over the kitchen wall.
Even the movies in the 80s felt like just a huge...
With the plethora of bad 80s movies, it can't be hard to find clips that support your claim, so we can only wonder why you're showing clips of Cheers, and he'll also flash the intro for Alf, and a clip of Miami Vice, the TV show, all to support the claim that the 80s only had 5 good movies.
Even the movies in the 80s felt like just a huge dopamine hit. They were trying to make you feel as good as possible throughout the film. I don't think that makes a good story. I don't think trying to make someone happy makes a good story, because where's the message in that and where's the truth?
I'm just trying to entertain you.
I don't want any entertainment.
Life can be happy, but life can also be sad. Life can also be miserable. Life can be angry. They just didn't seem to cover as many of the emotions and the emotional truths of life as other decades had prior. That's my opinion. Don't hold me accountable.
Then who should I hold accountable for your opinion? This is the easiest time in history to find all the great movies from the 80s that prove your claim is silly, and I highly doubt you've seen all the dark and twisted movies that contradict your claim and decided they're all just bad.
No movies in the 80s were remotely realistic.
Wrong.
This is a man speaking about truth that thinks the 80s had tens of thousands of bad movies, yet he can't fill a 7-minute video with those fucking clips.
When you watch 70s movies, the stories would give you a message for life, tell you something, give you a perspective you hadn't thought about. I talked about Michael Corleone before. For most people, they would have thought a mafia boss, they would have thought of them as a bad person. But through a different perspective in The Godfather, you go, oh, he's a family man, he's a good guy.
Holy shit!
I'm just going to gloss over your opinion that the man who takes over Daddy's criminal organisation is a
Good guy.
I'm just happy you have an example, but Godfather is literally the only example of a movie from another decade you give, and for some bizarre reason you're showing the cover picture for part 2, which is not a scene in the movie's original edit. But you know that, right? Because you've seen it, you've studied it, and you've overthinked about it. I mean, it's not like you just went on YouTube, grabbed someone else's thumbnail and thought, that'll do.
I challenge you to watch a few 80s movies. You'll probably like it while you watch them. The Lost Boys, Breakfast Club, and then after you'll just go, what was that?
I don't watch any entertainment.
Top Gun 1? That's not a good movie. Let's be real. That is not a good movie. While you watch it, you think it's awesome. Afterward, you realize it was utter garbage. And that's how I think of the 80s. I know I'm being mean here.
You're not being mean, you're being illogical.
Top Gun is not a good movie, but while you watch it, you think it's awesome.
That makes no sense at all.
Let's look at some of the movies that define the 80s, right? Some of the biggest movies of the 80s, the best films they had to produce. Karate Kid, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Top Gun, the best films they had to produce. Top Gun, and Back to the Future.
Who cares what movies defined the 80s? What's your opinion? What are the 5 good movies from the 80s?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a great film. It makes you happy watching it. It's a good movie. Where's the message in it?
Are you serious?
Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Where's the message in it?
Idiot!
Karate Kid, now that's a good movie. I'll give Karate Kid an 8 out of 10. I loved it. One of the best films, definitely top 3.
But it's not that good. Like, it's pretty good, but
8 out of 10. I loved it.
but it's not that good.
I'm confused.
There just weren't a lot of good movies in the 80s, and if that's the list, I mean, let's be real here, it doesn't compete with the other decades.
That's not the list. That's supposed to be your list. But you can't even make up your mind about the movies you like on your own list.
Shithead.
And out of all the other decades you say are better, you only name one movie. You could come up with one movie when you said there's 80 from the 70s and 90s alone. You are a terrible critic.
I'll be back.
Like the bloody video.